Okay, there we go. Awesome. Oh, yay, Fredericksburg is on with the owl. I can't wait to get an owl in an office where I can play with it. So I love that it shows everybody. So hi. All right, VA loans. We're going to go ahead and just jump right in on the VA loans. So one of the misconceptions that floats out there with VA loans is a question I get a lot about the VA loans, is that you can't waive the financing contingency on a VA loan. It's a huge thing that's out in the market right now. Agents think you can't waive the financing contingency. What you can do is waive a financing contingency on a VA loan, right? It's not the financing contingency that's really the challenge. It's the appraisal. And so the listing agents that are out there, when they see a VA loan coming through, they think, oh no, my hands are tied. VA appraisal process is terrible. We're never going to get this through, blah, blah. Okay. So on a VA loan, a VA buyer may actually be more qualified than a conventional buyer, likely more qualified than an FHA buyer. The VA buyer is taking advantage of their benefits from their service and using that VA loan. So a VA buyer might actually have a ton of money in the bank and they want to take advantage of the lower interest rate and finance 100%, right? It doesn't mean that they wouldn't be qualified for a conventional loan with 20% down. It just means they're choosing to use their benefit, right? It also doesn't mean that they can't waive the right to move forward with going to closing if it appraises low. They can't waive it up front, right? But they can use the appraisal gap process that we talk about in the other types of loans to move forward. What the challenge is that the VA requires a document to be signed. It's called a VA Notice of Value. And the VA Notice of Value says that the buyer has a statutory right to walk away and not negotiate if the appraisal comes in below the ratified contract price. So it's that escape clause, right? There's one of those with FHA, there's one with USDA. So it doesn't require the buyer to negotiate. Conventional appraisals require the buyer to negotiate before they can get out. The others don't. So this can make, right. FHA allows them out. That's right. So a seller is like, wait a minute, you're offering me all this money, because in this market, how many of you are writing offers that are at or below the list price, right? Probably not happening right now. Oh, well, okay, how long had it been on the market? Right? Okay, way overpriced, huh? Yeah. So most of the time we're writing above the list price. The seller's like, well, what's going to happen? Are you just using this to negotiate with me later? We're going to go with somebody else who's waiving their contingency completely. You guys all know how I feel about contingencies, right? Who knows what I say? Who remembers what I say about contingencies? It's all about the EMD, right? It's not about getting to the closing table. It's simply about the earnest money deposit. So with all of that said, how do we get our VA buyers to even be looked at when they're competing with people that are offering tens of thousands above the list price waiving all their contingencies. They're not required to sign this escape clause that says they can walk away without negotiating. What do we do? So if a buyer is comfortable with waiving their financing contingency completely and taking the risk that if something happens, their earnest money and more could be at risk, the buyer can waive that contingency completely. So what we do is we offer for them to negotiate that their appraisal gap is just everything, right? They're willing to pay whatever it is. That's the difference. We tell the seller that they can sign the notice of value late. We can talk about lender required repairs. We can do all sorts of things. So I'm going to actually share my screen with you, and we're going to go over a couple of suggestions that I have, written out that I'm going to send out to the offices so that you guys have these in your toolkit. Because you know how I love when you write your own contract language. All right, can you guys see my screen okay?
Shannon,
Yes.
I have a question, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but I just want to make sure. So the way you cannot do this is by just crossing out the verbiage under notice of value in the contingency that says the buyer shall not incur any penalty by forfeiture of earnest money or otherwise. You can't just cross that out.
Right, because that's the lender will kick that back.
Okay.
Because it's a statutory right that they cannot waive up front.
Okay. So that whole first sentence under notice of value, you can't like just cross that out and say, will we be willing to give up our earnest money and or complete the purchase? You have to do, and okay. Correct.
So that the ability to move forward can't occur until after the appraisal comes in. Okay, they still have the statutory right to void up until that appraisal comes in. So they can't say what they're going to do for sure until after. Once the appraisal comes in and they know what the value is, then they say they're going to move forward, then they're locked in. But up until they know what the value is, they can't waive their right.
Okay, but can you do, I know, okay, I'll just let you go over this, but can they do an addendum that says we're willing to give up the EMD, like a sales addendum?
No, because they don't know what the appraisal is.
But you do the same thing, but isn't that the same thing as an appraisal gap guarantee? You don't know what the appraisal is on that either, but you're saying you're going to make up a difference.
But it's not waiving the earnest money deposit.
Correct, right. But it's basically saying we're pledging to do something before we know the appraised value of the home.
Right. What a buyer's saying in an appraisal gap guarantee is that they are willing to pay out of pocket a certain amount over the appraised value. The seller is not saying that they are selling at that price.
Right.
Right. So it's not an agreement. It's the buyer saying that they are going to pay a certain amount, but it's not an actual change in the sale price.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to the VA notice of value, there's nothing negotiable before the appraisal comes in, as far as them waiving their right to move forward. It says in there very clearly that they are allowed to move forward, but up front they can't.
Okay.
Because they don't know what they're waiving.
And they can't up front say, if we do back out of the contract, we're willing to forfeit our EMD. Even though notice of value says that we don't have to, we are willing to do that.
So I just want to clarify for everybody that nothing written into the contract about waiving an earnest money deposit or an earnest money deposit being non-refundable is enforceable.
Okay.
When it comes to a buyer voiding a contract on a contingency that they have in place. So as an example, I saw a contract that came in recently that said if the buyer voided the contract during their home inspection contingency period, that half of their earnest money deposit would go to the seller. Well, that's not actually enforceable, because if they void during the home inspection contingency, then they are under the full protection of that contingency. And if they void, that means everybody goes back to their position that they're in prior to the contract being ratified, which means buyer gets their full money back and seller doesn't get any, right? Because the buyer declared the contract void. So there's no obligations for anybody.
So in that same scenario, Shannon, that addendum would not supersede the contract.
Right, because there's no such thing as a non-refundable deposit.
Correct.
Right, those are contradictory terms in that sentence. It would have to be a non-refundable portion of a down payment that they could provide, but a deposit is a deposit. So if they void, they get that back. So again, we have to be very careful, because there are unintended consequences when we write language. We know what we think we want it to say and what we think we want it to do, but it doesn't always do that.
So Shannon, how would you suggest conveying that? Because I know that's a strategy that Tim has used. Is there a better way to do that other than an addendum?
To do what exactly? To make something non-refundable?
Yeah, so if they say if we have like a 2-day void only home inspection, and if for some reason we void, we want to offer that money to the sellers, just as a way to show that we're serious. We don't really want to void. We would only do this under major circumstances. Like we've won a couple of bids because of that. Is there a way to make that more clear or more kosher? I don't know.
Yeah, so what it would be is that the deposit would be the deposit, and then the buyer would be paying an additional non-refundable down payment directly to the seller.
How would you notate that in the addendum or on the contract?
So it would be on the contract that there was an additional down payment being paid, or a portion of the down payment was being paid directly to the seller. The other thing that
Shannon, that would be referred in, if you're doing that, it would be, I presume, identified in the contract language as a non-refundable payment to seller, notwithstanding what happens with the transaction.
Right, it's a non-refundable down payment, right?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
And
so
that
it
would
has
go
to be
where?
separate. I'm sorry, Gailey?
And that would go under where you're saying, is it like the additional deposit under where you put the EMD?
No, it would be on an addendum, and
Okay.
it would be written out that says that, you know, if it's $100,000 down payment and, you know, 5,000 of it is being paid up front to the seller directly, you know, and it's non-refundable, you know, something like that
Okay.
could be done, but it has to be treated separate from the deposit paragraph, because there are escrow laws and requirements and certain things in the contract that direct how deposits are treated. And there is nothing can be treated as non-refundable.
So then who would hold it? Would it go into an escrow? So if it can't be in the deposit paragraph, it's just, okay.
It's a check directly to the seller.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Hey, Shannon,
Yes.
just for my clarity, Is there a better term to use than down payment? Because down payment to me refers to you're actually making a purchase on something and you're putting a payment towards that purchase. So if it's being refunded or you're letting them keep it, but you're not buying anything, would a different term be better than down payment?
No, it is actually a down payment. So that is the term that I would prefer to be used because it is a down payment towards the purchase of the real estate in the contract that they're writing. And it's non-refundable. So it is, if they go to closing, then it's reflected that they've already paid a portion of their purchase price to the seller. So it does have to be done that way. Now,
Gotcha.
am I suggesting that we do this? I'm not. I actually don't like it. I'm just clarifying that anything non-refundable cannot be called a deposit. Okay, so this is something that gets very tricky, and there's a reason that it's not an option in our contracts. Okay, if everybody in Virginia, Maryland, and DC got to sit through contracts classes and explanations with KW United, then I think we could probably do this at a high level. Because the agents on the other side of transactions are not trained like you are, I'm going to say that this is something that you should keep in your back pocket and use only when necessary. Okay. It's not something that I am.
Shannon, would this deposit be delivered at ratification, or when would this non-refundable deposit be delivered?
The non-refundable down payment.
Down payment, yes, sorry.
That's negotiable in the contract. I think that if it's something like in Michelle's example, it's related to the home inspection, the ability to have the home inspection. I think it would have to be delivered at ratification or within a day of ratification so that it is in the seller's hands prior to the action occurring that the buyers are being allowed to do.
Okay, thank you.
And if anybody wants to do this, reach out to me and we can get the language nailed down. This is off on a little different tangent than what I had prepared for us today. So I don't have the actual language nailed down like I do the VA stuff. So if anybody wants to use this, we'll work through it and we'll come up with something good. Okay.
Shannon, I think the other thing to think about is any of us have a listing where this is something like this is proposed by a buyer agent, to reach out to you and make sure whatever language is utilized, it protects your seller.
Yes.
And is enforceable. Like, you know, somebody could propose to do this. I could see us on the buy side proposing to do this, the non-refundable down payment. And the delivery of that money is, it's not going to the settlement agent, and the check doesn't go to the seller. And so you've proposed something that has given your client an advantage, but you haven't locked in language that actually delivers that money to them.
Right,
Now,
right.
it may be enforceable, but they don't have the money and the settlement company doesn't have the money. So from the reverse side, I think that's something we want to make sure that, you know, we've got our clients the money and the right language to enforce it.
Yep, absolutely. And we can always, you know, reach out and talk to our settlement companies and see before we write this, how they can help us. It certainly can be something where, you know, if we're doing a certified check directly to the seller, it can be dropped at the settlement company and then the buyer or the seller has to pick it up there, like, or maybe some of the settlement companies will accept it towards the down payment up front. You know, they'll accept funds, right, anytime after the contract is ratified. So we can work through those things on how the seller actually gets it. We just need to make sure that we have the if then language worked out before we write. And there are some listing agents that get nervous when they see all kinds of extra stuff come through on addenda. We had one earlier this week where one of our agents told me that he got an offer kicked back and was like, hey, please just make this simple, right? I don't understand what's happening with this. Please just make it simple. So we have to be conscious of that as well. All right, so back to VA. All right, so these are some of the strategies. You can use all or a combination of these for your VA offers, and these would go in a sales contract addendum. And this is for when your buyer wants to waive the financing contingency. It also can be used if they have the financing contingency. Okay, so it can be used in both scenarios. All right, so the appraisal gap guarantee language, of course, is in here. In the event of low appraisal, purchaser to pay blank above lender's appraised value not to exceed ratified contract price. That would be 2 words. I don't know why I can't fix that. Or if they're waiving the appraisal, trying to waive it completely, they would say, in the event of low appraisal, purchaser to pay difference between lender's appraised value and ratified contract price. Okay, this is important to lay that out when they have no contingency document at all. Okay, the next thing that they can say is that the purchaser to reimburse seller for any lender required repairs necessary for VA loan approval as a result of VA appraisal. Now, we always hear about all of these things that VA buyers can't pay for. Well, VA buyers can pay for repairs that need to be done to the home as a result of the appraisal. So something else that comes up regularly, right, is sellers thinking that there's going to be all of these extra required things that need to be done as a result of the appraisal, and they just, they don't want home inspections, they don't want this, they don't want that, we don't want any headache, right? So this is a way to mitigate that. In the VA financing contingency addendum, it's very clear, all of our financing contingency addendums state this, that if there are lender required repairs, buyer delivers notice to the seller of these repairs. Seller can deliver notice back to the buyer saying, hey, I'm not doing the repairs. And the buyer then has to be given the opportunity to deliver notice back to the seller saying that the buyer will do the repairs. Okay. I personally do not like the risk of buyers hiring contractors to do work on a seller's home, right? Buyer doesn't own the home. It's a little risky. So here, this is my preferred language, is that seller does the repairs and buyer reimburses them. Okay. So really the seller just has to coordinate the repairs. Now we get to what happens with the appraisal itself. After completion of VA appraisal, purchaser to deliver notice to seller that purchaser is moving forward with the purchase without regard to the VA appraised value. Okay, this is consistent with the language on our appraisal contingency removal addendum. Okay, one of the choices, I think it's the second choice, says that the buyer is moving forward without regard to the appraised value. So this would then happen after the appraisal comes in. Now we have the notice of value document being addressed. Okay, this is the crux of everything. This is the allowing the buyer to walk away. After the notice is delivered, the purchasers and sellers will execute the lender required VA notice of value and any other required documents to complete the loan process. So this gives the seller a little bit of comfort knowing that all of these other things have occurred, right? By the time we get to the point that they have to sign the notice of value. It is a separate document. There's also a document called a seller's affidavit that has to be signed. These can be signed at the very end of the underwriting process. These don't have to be signed up front by the seller. They can be signed at the very end. So when you're presenting an offer to a listing agent and to a seller, and you're putting all of this stuff out in writing, saying, I understand the VA process. I know what's going to happen. I've consulted with my buyer. We are very clear on what this process is, and this is what you're offering. You're going to have a leg up, okay? And if they aren't sure what's going to happen, you're helping to educate them. The other thing that a purchaser can do in a VA loan is a purchaser can pay closing costs for a seller. So this says the purchaser to credit seller at closing in the amount of blank for seller's grantors and WMATA taxes if applicable. So I put if applicable for the WMATA taxes because not all of you are in an area where there's WMATA taxes. Okay. So those are some of my addendum strategies. Now I have two other things that I suggest that we do. One of them with the appraisal gap guarantee, no matter if it's VA or not, is show me your money, right? Show me the money. Send proof of funds. If you are putting a $50,000 appraisal gap guarantee, I want you to show the seller the $50,000 plus your down payment plus your closing costs. Show them your money, okay? If you were on the listing side, I think at a minimum, that's what you should be looking for. If there's an appraisal gap guarantee of $50,000 and the only bank statement that's sent over is $50,000, but they're putting $100,000 down, I want to know how they're getting to closing, okay? There's a second thing that I'm suggesting now that we include with our offers when we are offering above the list price, especially with these appraisal gaps. I want you to include the comps. I want you to include the comps that you shared with your buyer so that you can prove to the listing agent that you had the conversation about the difference from the list price and where they offered and where their appraisal gap is. You are not doing the listing agent's job. You are doing your job. Okay? Don't misunderstand. The listing agent still has a responsibility to do the same. But what you are doing is increasing your credibility with the listing agent so that they know you didn't pull some number out of the air on that appraisal gap. That your buyer really knows that that's the gap that they might have to pay. Because all of the comps that you pulled said that this property should appraise at X dollars. And so their comfort level is where it is. Those of you that have had appraisal challenges, you know when you call me so that we can review, you know my first question is, where did the price come in when you reviewed the comps, when you made the offer? That's my first question. I need to know where our starting point is, right? So I know how to help you. So you're doing it anyway with your buyers, so include it. You're going to increase your credibility with the agents on the other side. You have to stand out with the agents, and this is a way to do it. Okay. I
So-
have just been yapping for a while, so you
Shannon,
guys, yes.
question. If you want to pay the seller's closing cost, you have to do an addendum. And what will be the verbiage?
So it would be purchaser to credit seller blank. Towards, and it needs to be specific on what they're covering because they can't pay all costs for the seller. There's certain duplicate costs they can't pay. They can't pay, you know, the seller has to pay for the termite, right? The buyer can't pay for the termite inspection. The seller has to when it's VA. So we have to make sure that the credit is appropriate. So on my suggested list, it was towards their, you know, grantor's tax and WMATA taxes. And then you calculate the number based on your offer price.
Thank
And I will share the list that I just pulled up on the screen for you guys.
Okay.
I'll put it in the files section on Facebook, in the Facebook groups. Did anybody think any of those suggestions could help?
Yes, of course.
And I do think that they can help with any offer, right? Not just VA. And I think VA is very important.
So
Right.
Shannon, just so I understand, all of this helps with the price, but none of this actually keeps a VA buyer from walking. They retain that right no matter what.
Up until they deliver the notice that they're moving forward after the appraisal comes in.
Okay, so even if we did something like in the event of a low appraisal, buyer to pay difference between lender's appraised value and ratified contract price. So that gives the seller a lot of confidence that the financing is waived, right? That we're going to pay the difference, right? But it doesn't tell them, but they could still walk, right? That option to void is always still an option for the VA buyer, even if you put this kind of language into it.
Yes, until the appraisal comes in, that's right.
Okay.
And so that's the important part of showing their bank statements, right? Because a buyer who's willing to show their bank statements is less likely to walk away. I mean, could it still happen? Of course it could. And so it's setting expectations. If you're on the listing side, you're setting the expectations. But if the buyer is willing to go through that whole process, they are less likely to walk away when they do that.
May I ask a question?
Of course.
Okay, the comps that you have suggested to send with them. Do you suggest sending those separately from the actual, you know, how we combine it and make it one nice clean PDF at the end? Or do you want us to put it at the bottom of all of that? Sorry, admin question here because I suck at it.
Yeah, no. That's a good question. So everybody has their own preference in how they like to send offers. I prefer when I send an offer, I want to see the lender letter in one document. I want to see contract documents in one PDF. So that's going to be in anything that says NVAR at the bottom, right? And then I would say the comps would be in a separate PDF, right? And then I'm going to type a nice email that explains what my attachments are, right? Because the printout from Bright isn't part of the offer, right? It's your credibility, right? If you're including a bank statement from your client so that you can prove that they have the money, that's going to be separate. It's not actually part of the offer. It's backup documentation to show their credibility. So that's how I send it. But if you want to combine it all as one PDF, then that's up to you.
Okay, thank you.
It probably doesn't surprise you guys that when we used to do everything on paper, like I had folders and, you know, certain things went on this side and certain things went on this side. And if I had a short sale, I had a folder with different dividers and, you know, like it just, everybody has a way, right?
Shannon, you're bringing back nightmares of legal files where case files were 19 different subsets and 2-hole punching documents and yeah.
Well, I'll tell you though, when you get in the habit of doing something a certain way, then you don't have to think about it. And I think that's where it comes from, right? When you always know where something is or where it goes, it makes it easier.
You know, some listing agents are actually putting in their instructions how they want the offer. I've seen some actually say, I want everything in one clean PDF in order. And then I've had some say, I want this separate. So, you know, definitely always look to see what the listing agent's asking for first.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. And, you know, I think that sometimes what they want it as one PDF, that's fine, but certain things aren't part of the offer, right? So when you're uploading it to Command, you can certainly take out things that aren't part of the offer and only put what's the contract. All right. What other things would you guys like to talk about today?
Shannon, I have a forward-facing or outward-facing marketing question for you to enlighten us about how not to do something. So in one of the communities that I farm, I had 3 different residents send me a photo of what we would in Keller Williams refer to as the golden letter. And they sent it to me as a joke because they laughed at it. And looking at it, and I'm not going to get into substance as far as effective or not, but this is the sum total of it. I may have a buyer for your home as the letterhead. Dear homeowner, would you be interested in selling your home to a client of mine? If so, please contact me at phone number or email. Thank you. Signature happens to be a Keller Williams agent, not KW United. There's no information at the bottom of the page regarding brokerage, license, office, etc. That's it. And it went it was mailed out to residents in one of the communities. So most of us probably know that fails on any number of reasons, but since this is a real world example, I thought I'd bring it up for you to highlight what we need to do in terms of compliance.
Yeah. So on the Facebook pages, in the file section, everybody has access to the marketing checklist. And the marketing checklist we put together so that it was one list of things that is consistent across the board for all of your marketing. And that way you don't have to think about whether you're putting it online, whether you're mailing it, whether it's a sign, you know, what you're doing. We wanted it, whether it's DC or Maryland or Virginia, we just did one list and to make it super easy for you guys. So when you're mailing things out, there is one extra disclaimer that has to go on. So obviously you need the brokerage information. Our logo does not count as the brokerage name. So always remember that KW United dash whichever market center you're in has to be typed out in words on whatever your marketing is. You can't just plop the logo on and the boards don't approve that as saying who your brokerage is. But if you're mailing something to a neighborhood, at the bottom, there has to be a disclosure that says if you are currently under or in a brokerage relationship with another brokerage, this is not a solicitation, right? That's a key thing that's missing from a lot of these letters that go out. So make sure that that is on anything that gets mailed out, that disclosure. Now it's written out, the exact verbiage that we're looking for is on that marketing checklist. And if you're including any market stats, there is also a disclosure that we want you to put on there that says, this information is deemed, reliable and where it's sourced from. So yeah, it looks like a lot, but when you really chunk it down and put it on something, it's not too much, right? I had somebody ask me one time, do I really have to put all that on my business card? And so I sent a screenshot of my business card and they were like, oh yeah, that's not so bad. Like, yeah, it looks like a lot, but it's really not too much. But be careful. People out there right now are, I don't know how I can say this. They're tattletales. They're a bunch of tattletales. And in a market like this, when they're not doing enough to get their own clients, they're going to go out and they're going to tattle on you if they see you doing something wrong, because somehow that makes them feel better, right? You're doing better than they are. And so they're going to go out and tattle on you because, I don't know, it makes them feel better about themselves, right? So be careful, because you will get tattled on if that gets into the wrong hands. Same thing with some of the Bright fines and notices that come out. Bright figures out some things, and Bright receives notifications from others. So most of the time it's for marketing of things that aren't in the MLS that someone alerts them to, and that is an automatic $5,000 fine. So your sign gets delivered too early and you don't have it in the MLS, you are going to get an automatic $5,000 fine. So be very careful, because we have a bit of a target on our back, and it doesn't happen often, but when it does, we have to be careful.
Shannon.
Shannon,
Yeah, Giovanna, go ahead.
well, you are giving us so many good tips for the buyers to win the offer, and I was just typing in, but I don't want to lose the opportunity to share my experience with the new, and you were helping me with that. Unfortunately, the advice came after I lost the offer.
Oh no.
When I was in the middle of the negotiations, and finally I won the offer. And then the listing agent called me and told me, hey, Giovanna, my client is using this title company. Is that okay if we switch it to our title company? And then I said, well, the reason I use Universal and Icon, and the reason I use Icon is mostly because he's a Spanish speaker and my client feels more comfortable, with the closing in Spanish. If you have anybody that can perform as a Spanish speaker, I think that it won't have any problem. But my client, that was the second closing with this Icon, and they want to keep with Icon. So I told him, my client is hesitating and he really would he's more comfortable with Icon. And then he told me, well, then will you ask your client if he is willing to lose the opportunity to get his house just because of the title company? And then, well, at the end, I told him about the new rules and all this and that, and said, well, at the end, I lost the transaction. Good, because I got a better house, but still, I guess that he was violating.
Yeah. So no, I'm glad you brought that up. So I want to elaborate for just a minute on Giovanna's situation. Right now, for whatever reason, there is a big focus on settlement agents from the seller side. seller side is trying to direct who the settlement agent is for the transaction. This is 100% a RESPA violation. It is clear, cut and dry, black and white, no gray area whatsoever, a RESPA violation, okay? However, when there are multiple offers on these properties, it is very hard to prove if your client does not get accepted because they did not use the right title company, okay? The listing side can come up with some other reason, some other term that was in the contract that the seller wanted instead of yours, okay? So how do you get around this? One of the things that Giovanna and I talked about was when you have a listing agent who's pushing for this settlement company, and that's the only thing that's holding back ratification, this is when you can put whoever it is that they wanted, and then in the EMD line for who's holding the EMD, instead of writing out the name of that company, you put the words settlement agent. Okay, what this does is this allows you at some point after ratification to send a notice to the seller side that you are changing settlement agents. This also allows for the EMD to be delivered to the new settlement agent and not to the original settlement agent because you didn't actually say the name of the company. Okay, so in this example, Giovanna used Universal Title and Icon Title. If Icon Title was who was written as the settlement agent and Icon Title was written as who's holding the EMD, and 2 days after ratification, Giovanna sends a notice that says buyer selects Universal Title as settlement agent and sends it off, that does not change who's holding the EMD. That has to be done on an addendum that's signed by all parties. So by using the words settlement agent, you're covered, and now the EMD can be delivered to Universal Title, okay? Also along those lines, I will start, well, I already have started returning contracts that come in that indicate where a seller is signing. If it says that it's a law firm, you're likely just going to get a note from me that says, hey, next time leave this off. If it indicates a separate settlement agent that's a settlement company, so in this case, if it said Icon Title is the buyer's chosen settlement agent, and then you somewhere in the margin it says seller chooses Universal Title, I'm going to send it back and I'm going to ask for an addendum to be done, removing that from the contract. Okay, because
Say it again, that the last part, please.
So there can't be two title companies in a transaction. And so I'm still seeing contracts come through that say the seller's using another title company. And it really doesn't belong anywhere on the contract at all where the seller's signing. If the seller is signing somewhere besides where the buyer has chosen, then it has to be a law firm that they have hired. Okay, so when they hire, if they want to sign at Universal Title, then it's actually the Mason law firm that they're engaging. They're not engaging Universal Title, they're engaging the Mason law firm. Okay, so I just want to be clear and give you guys a heads up that I do have to return those for the addendum. All right, it's not, trust me, I don't want to look at your documents more than once. So I only return them for things that they have to be returned.
And then in the contract, Shannon, it would be X title, and then an addendum will be the Mason firm.
Well, so
So
it doesn't, it's actually not a negotiable part of the contract. So it doesn't belong in the contract at all.
Okay.
So it's just, if you're putting it in there, then you would have to indicate that it's the Mason law firm. Really, It's just an email after ratification to whoever the settlement agent is that's listed, saying, hey, my seller has engaged the Mason law firm. Here's their contact information, right? That's really all it is. Fredericksburg, you guys have your hand up.
Yes, it is not on this specific topic though. So if somebody has a question on this specific topic, that is, I think Gailey might.
Okay, and then we'll come back.
Okay.
Okay, awesome.
I do too.
On this topic or a different one, Anya?
This topic, yes.
Okay, Gailey and then Anya.
So Shannon, if you, because I just had this happen too, the seller said, you know, we'll ratify if you agree to use this law firm. Fine, my clients were fine with it, we did it. But so had we written in there settlement company, and assuming the selling agent, the listing agent didn't catch it, right? And they let it go through, it's all fine. If the listing agent, like in my case, he actually put in the law firm that he wanted. So assuming that happens and the EMD goes to that law firm, we can give a notice saying we're going to close at UT, but the other settlement company still has the EMD. Is there a way to get that EMD transferred, or is it a done deal once the EMD is sent?
Yeah, so you would send an addendum stating that the EMD is going to be transferred. The original settlement agent probably doesn't want to hold on to that money.
Okay.
And so they're going to help you to get that signed because they don't want to hold on to that money because it's not their transaction
Anymore, right?
Yeah.
So it's just a notice, a two-part notice. One, we're changing title company, and two, we need the EMD to be transferred.
So it's one notice and one addendum.
One notice, one addendum. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the settlement agent is not a negotiable part of the contract. And so that's why it can be done in a notice, but the EMD is negotiable. And so that's why it has to be an addendum.
Got it.
Yep. Okay, Anya, you're up.
So I am going to be working with a relocation company on the listing side, and I was told by the relocation company manager, whomever I'm communicating with, that they must be closing with their own title company. How do I make sure, because obviously I can't force the buyer to close with them. How do I deal with this now that they can't do, right? We can't have a split settlement. What do I do in this situation?
So what you need to do is verify that their title company has a law firm that is associated with them. You would be surprised. Not all law firms have title companies. Or I'm sorry, not all title companies have law firms that are associated. So just make sure that they have a law firm associated with them and you'll be fine.
Oh, I think it is. It's like a Shaheen or something. So as long as
Oh yeah,
the law firm,
she and law PLC or something.
I think so. It's with the, what is it, Allegiance relocation company?
Yeah, I think that's who they use and it's a law firm. So you're fine.
Okay, great. So as long as the law firm, then it could be a split settlement.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's really not a split settlement. You know, I mean, it is for our purposes. That's what we refer to it as, but really it's the settlement itself is all handled by whoever the buyer chooses. They represent the transaction, and then the seller has legal representation by whichever law firm they've hired.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
On that note real quick. So I'm using Shaheen. My sellers are, the buyers are using Universal, and I introduced them and I had no issue and they were very happy. The Shaheen people were really nice and they're like working with Shannon and no issue whatsoever. Everybody's happy and seems to be working fine.
Yeah, they work it out behind the scenes. There's I don't know why it's become a thing. I mean, I could give you some opinions, but it doesn't have to be a thing, right? They work it out behind the scenes, and it's super easy. Gailey, you have another question about this, or was your hand just still up? Okay, awesome. Okay, Fredericksburg, we're back to you.
Thank you. Okay, this is Bree. It's not under my name, but I'm Bree. So I'm asking a few questions today, and it's all in regards to a listing, one of my first listings actually coming up. And it's complicated. The listing is currently behind in their mortgage, and they're in the process of foreclosure. We spoke with the bank, and the bank said that the property could still be sold currently by me listing it, but I have no idea what I'm doing with the foreclosure, if there's something I need to be aware of, if there's legality things I need to be concerned about. So I'm hoping that you may be able to give me some guidance on questions I need to ask, forms I need to have filled out, in whichever. And then I have a second part to the question as well.
Okay, that's awesome. So Allie is going to be helping you every step of the
Yes.
way, right? Because she's your mentor extraordinaire. So you will be in good hands with that. When we have listing agreements filled out, there's that lien section where we have to have the clients tell us whether they're behind on anything, whether, and it's for this reason, right? Because there are certain times that we can't take a listing based on where they are in the process. If the home is in foreclosure, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's like coming up for sale on the courthouse steps, right? It could mean that they're only, they're 30, 60 days behind. Like it really doesn't matter, right? How far behind they are. Once they hit that 30-day mark, it moves into the other department. Okay. And so there's like two trains that sort of go at the same time. We used to see this with short sales, right? Where we'd list a short sale, but it was still in the foreclosure track, and it was really whoever could get to the station first won. Now it's just a regular listing, because most of the time these sellers have equity. And so it's not a short sale because they can sell it and get their money. So it's still the two trains traveling, and it's whoever gets to the station first that wins. So my suggestion on anything like this is to every deal, I think we should be doing this, and especially when they tell you they're behind, we need to be getting the copy of their last mortgage statement. Even when they haven't been paying, they're still getting mortgage statements.
Yeah.
And on the mortgage statement, it's going to say when the last time was they made a payment. So that's going to give us an idea, of how far behind they are, right?
Yes.
Yes. If the bank tells us where they are in the process, that tells us what the timing is. The other thing I would do is I would pay Universal Title to have the title search done, to make sure that we know what the liens are. Okay, it's around $100. And they'll do the title search for you, and they'll tell you, okay, yes, this is the only lien on the property, or oh wait, they didn't tell you they had a second trust. So it's really not just this one, they have a second one. Or there's some tax they didn't pay, and now there's a lien for that. So you need to know what all of the outstanding balances are,
Okay.
so that you know whether it can be sold.
Okay.
Shannon, the second trust should be into the balance of the bank.
So a second trust is just another loan, right? So when you're doing the net sheet, you need to know how much they owe total to all of the creditors to know whether it can be sold outright.
And it's not necessary because these people
That's necessary every time.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that you have to treat it as a foreclosure, or, because I got a house and he was behind 10 months. And I treated it as a standard since he didn't, the bank sent different, notice, but he wasn't. I think that we closed. I sold the house as an auction and as a cash, and then the week after the house was in auction. Was supposed to be in an auction. So it was 10 months, but we could still be in as a regular standard.
No, it is a regular sale, but she needs to make sure that she knows what all of the liens are on the property.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. I know, I read one of the letters. I met with them on Monday, and one of the letters that they had from the bank, it was dated for the 14th of this month. And it stated if like the balance wasn't brought current within 60 to 90 days, the bank would take possession. So I know that I have as short as 60 days to get it sold. So that makes sense. My next question that I have, it's with the same property. So I got the deed from public records, and it is, it's put in joint tenants with full common law of right to survivorship. There's 3 people on the house. One of them has passed, and that person who's passed has not been recorded with the public records for their passing. I need to know, does that need to be done prior to this property going live on MLS? No.
No, you
How
need
does
the
that
death-
get
you need
taken
the death certificate.
We have it. Yep.
Yep. So what you need though is for universal title to do the title search to verify that that is truly the case of how it was recorded. What you were able to pull might be different from what they pull to make sure
Okay.
that there wasn't something else that was recorded. after.
Okay. Okay. So my course of action should be to pay the $100 with universal title, have them do all of the search on title, give us liens, tell me how the deed was recorded on, like what they can see on their end. And then after that's complete is when I can have the listing go live.
Yeah, after the listing agreement signed, so you'll need the
Yeah.
death certificate submitted with the listing agreement,
Okay.
right? Because that's something that we check to make sure that we're in the agreement with all parties that are supposed to be. Yeah.
Okay.
But I would, so as much as we can look at things like the deeds and whatnot, it's best to have the title company review it in a case like this because they're the experts.
Okay. And would you, like, should I just pay that $100 myself, or would you ask your clients to pay it? What would you, how would you proceed with that?
So what I would say is that that is a decision you can make for your business practice, right? There's
Okay.
certain services that you're going to include in your fee that you charge your clients. So something like that, me personally, I'm just including because of what my fee is that I charge my sellers.
Okay.
So that just like professional photos, right? I'm not charging extra to my sellers for professional photos because that's something that I need to be able to do my job properly.
Okay. Okay. Easy peasy. That answers my questions.
Awesome. Good
Thank
job.
you.
Boy, I want to tell you guys, I see a lot of names and not a lot of faces. So thank you for those of you that have your cameras on.
One last thought on this subject about liens and such that, obviously it's always great to find out that information before you list, before you're under contract, but solutions can be found at the back end. I had a sale 2 years ago in Overlook where the selling client thought the bankruptcy had been discharged. It hadn't. And there was a outstanding judgment with the judgment creditor in South Africa. And we were able to work the transaction and get everything resolved. UT was involved, an attorney was involved. So even though things come up and so there's no way to deal with it, chances are there probably is, if people are reasonable. So that's a worst case scenario that ended up working out just fine, and we weren't delayed at all in the settlement period.
Yeah, you never know what's going to come up,
And Shannon, I had and that was so long that I didn't expect, where the brother passed away, and when we were trying to sell the property, this came up, and he wasn't the only one. So once we find out that he had a brother and he was one of the heirs, they were asking as well if the brother he had a family or he had children, and we have to go. We couldn't find the body, so I have to call Fairfax. Well, at the end, I found the body in Washington, D.C. And we have to go in front of the judge with all this information
Mhm.
and stating that there were no heirs, just him. And just at that point, we could sell the house.
Yeah.
But when somebody passed away, it's better to see, there are a lot of stuff that come up. So it's better just to straight up, you know.
Yeah, no, it can definitely be tough. But use our resources, right? As best we can when we can. So, all right, it is 12:08. Gonna let you guys go eat lunch and enjoy the sunshine because I think it's gonna be cloudy again tomorrow. I don't understand. I want spring back. I don't know why we got winter back. Who knows? Bree, congratulations on your new listing. You're going to learn a lot on this one. So I think it's
Thank
awesome.
I figured at least my first one, if it's gonna be difficult, I'm getting it all out the way the
Yeah,
first time.
yes,
So it should be
well,
better.
every deal is different and it's good to just jump right in on one that's gonna make
Congratulations on this one. You're gonna learn a lot. And this is the time that you're gonna learn, that you have the time to learn. Because once you're gonna be on the go, you're gonna have more business, but you're gonna be prepared already with all this. So
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you guys.
Yep, awesome. All right, you all have a
Shannon.
wonderful day.
Shannon, how was hockey this past week since you were
Oh my
announced
gosh.
last Friday how
Oh yes,
you were going to be?
last weekend the boys won. Jake's team won. Oh, you know what? I'm going to stop recording real quick because I want to show you guys something if you'll indulge me for a second.